Hello there guys, what is going on? Daniel Childs back here again for my team selector ahead of the Champions League last 16 first leg against Borussia Dortmund tomorrow night. It's a huge game, it's a glamour tie, it's a tie I've actually wanted Chelsea to get for a number of years, either in the group stage or in a knockout stage. It's bizarre to me, a bit like Real Madrid, how many years we went without facing them, that it's taken this long to face Borussia Dortmund. But it's a massive test for Graham Potter, it's a massive test for the players. And the form of both of these sides is very different going into this game. So I think a lot of people will naturally lean, especially in the home leg for Dortmund, towards Dortmund. And it's not the case that, this is the strongest Dortmund team you could have faced in the past 5 years, but there are some very good players within their system. And I think that the hostile nature of this game and the fact it is a Champions League tie makes it a difficult one for Chelsea when you throw in the fact that Chelsea haven't been winning a lot of games recently. So big test, but I do also think that this game, as I said before, the two against Man City and the one before Liverpool, that this is a massive chance, I think, for Graham Potter to win a lot of credit with Chelsea supporters. It's not the fact that he has to win the game within 90 minutes tomorrow. If Chelsea can win over two legs against Dortmund in the next few weeks, I think that's massive credit to him. I think it is, and it's a big win. So if Chelsea can put in a good performance tomorrow night, if they can get a win, brilliant, because I think it would give everyone such a massive lift, which is so needed right now. But it's going to be a massive test. So we're going to go into the team news, looking at the players who could be involved, the players who aren't involved, some of those returning players from injury that I think makes the lineup tomorrow quite interesting. We'll also look at Borussia Dortmund. If you're new around here, hit that subscribe button, hit the notification bell. Also make sure, if you're not listening on the podcast feed, you can listen to this show as a podcast, because Son of Chelsea is part of the 90 Min podcast network. But if you are listening via the feed, thank you so much for tuning in. And also make sure to give us a positive rating review. It really does help out. But let's have a look at Borussia Dortmund. So as you can see there, the last five, all green. A lot of green for Borussia Dortmund. Win. And it's longer than that, actually, their winning run in the Bundesliga, along with some cup games thrown in there. They've been doing well. They really have. Despite, the odd shaky performance in the first half of the season, they really have peaked at this point as we've head into 2023 and into the knockout stages of the Champions League, which isn't good news for Chelsea, but real good news for Borussia Dortmund. I know from an English perspective, and I think from just a general perspective, you see it by thumbnail, you see it on the graphic there, Jude Bellingham. It's very natural people are looking at him, not only because of his kind of stardom within, the Borussia Dortmund team, the fact that this is an English talent who's gone abroad, a bit like Jadon Sancho to Dortmund, and really excelled. And, of course, for Bellingham has been linked with Chelsea in recent years. So, it's going to be a massive, I think, moment for him personally, coming up against a big English team with the potential that he could be moving to England this upcoming summer for a massive fee. But then there are other names within this team that excite me. Moukoko, we did speak about him as a potential Chelsea target in the January window. He's been, proving to be another one of these kind of younger gems that kind of the classic Borussia Dortmund player that they uncover at an early age that offers great value that in like 2 to 3 years they're going to make a profit of. And there are a lot of players within this team, whether that's Reina, a young exciting American prospect. I also think Julian Brandt is kind of an experienced Bundesliga player at this time, done well at Bayer Leverkusen, moved over to Borussia Dortmund, and still scored at the weekend, still is a talent on the wing that could offer things. Guerrero, I think, as a left back is quite exciting, has done well for them in recent years. Nicolas Sula was a free transfer from Bayern Munich last year as a defender who Chelsea as well were linked with. So there are a lot of names throughout this. Emre Can, of course, had a few years at Liverpool, has moved, back to Germany and is doing well for them as well. And I also think Marco Reus, what an incredible career he's had, still going at his age. Player that's just been, it feels like has been at Dortmund forever at this point and was one of those players for years and years and years. There were links that he could go to Arsenal, could come to the Premier League, could go elsewhere. But he stayed loyal to Borussia Dortmund and is very much a leading player for them still in this team. The 4-1-4-1, as we expect with Dortmund, the high pressing game, it is going to be open at times, and I think that obviously gives Chelsea a chance. But as I would note, when you look back to the group stage when they had Man City in the game at home, it was a 0-0 draw, and Dortmund were maybe a little bit more reserved in that game than you expect. So I think this stereotype that we have of the Bundesliga as kind of this high pressing, all action game isn't always true, especially when you get into kind of European knockouts. Is that there can be a versatility and a little bit of an adaptation when they do come up against other teams. So beware of that. But obviously Dortmund, as we know, can be involved in some crazy games. When you think of going particularly away from home to Signal Iduna Park, you think of kind of that vibrant, attacking, very energetic game, and that can very much overwhelm Chelsea, which is a threat tomorrow. But with Chelsea, we go into the team news, which I do think is a little bit intriguing. So on the positive, Denis Zakaria, Mateo Kovacic and Wesley Fofana have all trained. How many of those are going to actually feature tomorrow? I think it's unlikely Wesley Fofana features. I mean, this is a guy who hasn't played for Chelsea in a competitive capacity since October against AC Milan. I know he obviously was involved a little bit in that training camp before we went back into football after the World Cup, but I don't suspect he's going to be thrown back in against Borussia Dortmund. Denis Zakaria and Mateo Kovacic are more exciting because midfield has kind of been a light area since Enzo Fernandez arrived, and kind of those players that you could pair up with Enzo Fernandez I think is quite intriguing, and those two do excite me, and I think hopefully in the upcoming weeks we will see either of those two, or maybe both, in the midfield for Chelsea alongside Enzo Fernandez. But no Raheem Sterling, Edouard Mendy, N'Golo Kante, Christian Pulisic, none of those players involved here. No Pierre-Emerick Aubameyang, who obviously wasn't selected for this Champions League squad. No Benoit Badiashile, who I think that's proving and could prove to be a very big error for Chelsea. But it does mean that some players can return back into this team who maybe haven't featured in recent weeks. Sterling, of course, has picked up that knock and isn't involved, and apparently hasn't travelled to Germany as well. Lewis Hall and Lucas Bergstrom apparently part of the B list, so they could be involved as well. This is my predicted 11. So as you can see here, we're sticking with the 4-2-3-1. I know that people sort of turn around and go, it isn't a formation that's been getting Chelsea wins, but I still think we are seeing shoots of progress with this formation. And I'm not really, just because it's the Champions League, I'm not really about going to a 3-4-3 system, a really reactive system. I think that Graham Potter, and I just think for the club's sake and for the rest of this season, there needs to be a sense of continuity when you can get it, particularly with the number of new names coming in. When we had the Champions League win under Thomas Tuchel, he didn't have a load of new players to work with. He was working with a squad that was kind of already settled within the season and kind of bringing a system into that for a short-term kind of boost. I think for what Potter has to do, whether it's the Champions League or the Premier League, is trying to build that chemistry over a period of time. So as you can see, it's a bit of a mix in terms of the players we saw on Saturday, some of the players returning, some of those players who haven't been involved recently. So my team, Kepa in goal, kind of obvious at the moment. Edouard Mendy still out, and I don't think Kepa is doing too wrong at the moment, to be honest. Had, 2 or 3 clean sheets before Saturday's game. Ben Chilwell, I think, has to be starting this game, particularly if we are going to look to get more out of Mykhailo Mudryk if he starts further up the pitch. I just think Chilwell, hopefully he's ready now to make a start in one of these games. And Cucurella, as we know, has been under a lot of scrutiny recently and hasn't been playing well. So I just think it's the right time for Ben Chilwell to start one of these games. I really do. It's tough to know who partners Thiago Silva, and for experience, for kind of, if you're thinking about, Champions League experience and pedigree, you'd go with Kalidou Koulibaly. But then I also think that Trevor Chalobah, for me, just as a player in terms of form this season, I also just think it is better than Kalidou Koulibaly this season. And I just trust Trevor Chalobah more than Koulibaly, which is a weird thing to say. You know how much I love and rate Trevor Chalobah as a player. I really do. I think he has proven a lot of people wrong. I think he's proven to be a real gem in terms of Chelsea, giving him that start. Thomas Tuchel giving him that breakthrough in the summer of 2021, and I think it is proved highly valuable for Chelsea. But I also think that, Trevor Chalobah, again, it just goes back to those two players. I just think for the type of game this is going to be, and the fact that Koulibaly has looked sluggish, hasn't looked connected with the players around him, I just have more trust in Chalobah at the current point. But I could understand if, again, you look at experience, you'd throw Koulibaly in there, and maybe it's a chance for him to prove his experience once again. And he hasn't been in the team since the likes of Enzo Fernandez have come back in and Reece James has got back fit. But I'd prefer to go with Chalobah. Thiago Silva, obviously Reece James remains in the team. Midfield 2, maybe a little bit of surprise that Mateo Kovacic could maybe start this game. Again, you are kind of throwing a player who hasn't played in a little bit back into the fray, but Kovacic, for me, in this type of game where Chelsea are going to be put under pressure in central areas, and you do need someone who's able to break that press, and also I think assist Enzo Fernandez to someone who transitions the ball a little bit better. I just think Kovacic is a highly experienced player in these type of situations for Chelsea. I just hope when he does get back fit and he does start playing, he can rediscover some of the things that made him a really influential player, or at least player that you could rely upon last season. I think was kind of his best and most consistent season performance-wise for Chelsea. I think he's been a lot more erratic, and some of that has been due to injury issues that he has been suffering, and he's always been one of those players who picks up a few injuries during the season. But I just think Mateo Kovacic will be one of those players that I think that Graham Potter will get back into this midfield and maybe partner with an Enzo Fernandez. Those two could maybe work well together. The three behind the striker, Mykhailo Mudryk, I want to see on the left, particularly with Ben Chilwell. We just didn't utilise him at all over the weekend. Wasn't getting the ball, and that was the same in the first 45 minutes against Fulham. You need to be getting Mudryk on the ball. You need to be getting him in behind the defence. And if there is space to exploit against Dortmund, this is the time to do it. With Mykhailo Mudryk, away from home, transition player, that speed that he's got, that directness that he's got, we've got to be getting the ball to him, and we've got to be using the likes of Ben Chilwell to rotate with Mudryk, and I think that can really cause a majority of defence's problems. Joao Felix obviously has to be starting this game after his goal at the weekend and looking so influential. On the right side, I'm going to go with Hakim Ziyech, just based on performances recently. But again, I think without Raheem Sterling, with no Noni Madueke in this squad, with no Christian Pulisic, with no Raheem Sterling, I've always said Sterling, but obviously he's not available. Maybe you put Mason Mount here, and maybe it becomes more of a 4-3-3 to add an extra body in central midfield to compete with, say, Jude Bellingham. But I do think that Ziyech, out of, if I'm looking at Mount and Ziyech's performance levels over the past month, I think that Ziyech has been more influential. So I'd go with him on the right side of Reece James. Kai Havertz, obviously, I think is starting this game. I don't know who else. We've no Aubameyang in the squad. Fofana wasn't selected. Who else goes up top for Chelsea? And no Armando Broja obviously being injured. So it's just quite obvious. And, I don't think that's based on performance, but Kai Havertz has proven in the Champions League that he can score some important goals for us. So he's going to need to do that if Chelsea are going to get through. That is my team. I want to know yours in the comments below. It is the sort of tie I think you just get excited for because it is the Champions League, and we don't know when we're getting Champions League football back at Chelsea. So I think this is one to savour, and hopefully the players can turn up, and hopefully those shoots of optimism can kind of build to something more tangible over a 90-minute period. But it's going to be difficult, it's going to be intense, but hopefully Chelsea can turn up. Those are my thoughts. Let me know yours in the comments below. Follow me on Twitter @SonOfChelsea, and I'll see you again very soon. All the best.